Touch her and you'll regret it. David's voice sliced through Viva Blanc's opulent dining hall, his grip firm on Maya's wrist as her hand hovered midair, poised to strike Kem Lawson. Maya's smug sneer faltered, her confidence crumbling into shock as the room's gaze shifted from mockery to awe. Cassandra, moments ago dismissed as an outsider, stood unshaken, her heart racing not with fear, but with a quiet thrill of vindication. In that instant, the elite's polished world tilted. A single table, a stolen reservation, and a hidden truth about power unraveled a fortress of privilege. This isn't just a story of confrontation. It's a reckoning that reshaped an empire. Tune in, share where and when you're listening, and join our channel to uncover how one woman's dignity turned a room's arrogance into dust. Stay until the end. The truth will leave you speechless. The late afternoon sun spilled molten gold across Viva Blanc's glass facade, casting the restaurant as a temple of untouchable privilege. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and ambition, the clink of crystal stemware, a quiet hymn to wealth. Kem Lawson stepped through the polished doors at precisely 300 p.m., her ivory silk dress skimming her curves with a faultless grace. Her hair, a cascade of soft coils, was swept into a low bun, and her only adornment was a thin gold bracelet that caught the chandelier's firework glow. She carried no designer bag, no statement heels, just the weight of her own presence, steady and unapologetic. Yet, as she crossed the marble floor, she felt the room take inventory. Her skin, her stride, her audacity to exist in a space that curated its guests as meticulously as its menu. Cassandra approached the hostess podium where a young woman with a tight blonde bun and an even tighter smile stood guard. The name tag read, Melassa. "Good afternoon," Kem said, her voice warm but firm. "I'm here for the Langford birthday dinner. Kem Lawson, table 3 by the garden window." Melassa's eyes flicked over her, a brief scan that lingered just long enough to betray calculation. She flipped through a leather-bound reservation book, her manicured nails pausing on a page. "I'm sorry," she said, her tone clipped. "I don't see your name here." Cassandra's smile didn't waver. "It should be there." "My husband, Robert Reed, confirmed it with the Langfords directly." Melassa's mouth twitched, a micro-expression Cassandra had seen too often, protocol wrestling with prejudice. "One moment, please," she said, leaning to whisper to another hostess. Cassandra stepped aside, the soft jazz and murmured conversations swirling around her like a tide she wasn't meant to join. She wasn't offended, not yet, but her mind cataloged every detail. The way Melassa's eyes avoided hers, the subtle shift in the room's energy as guests glanced her way. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The crowd, mostly white and draped in effortless wealth, flowed past her without pause. A woman in red Louboutin sailed through with a nod. A man in linen was ushered to a private lounge without a second glance. Then a storm arrived in emerald silk. Emily, blonde, tanned, and radiating, the confidence of someone who owned every room she entered, swept toward the podium. Melassa straightened, her smile blooming. "Miss Langley, welcome. Your favorite table is ready. Table 3. Cassandra's heart thudded. She turned, her voice even but sharp. "Excuse me, that's my table reserved for me." Melassa blinked, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There must be a mix-up. Miss Langley is a regular. That table's been hers for weeks." Before Kem could respond, a new voice cut in, sharp and gleeful. "Oh, darling, you must be lost." Claire Dubois, Veronica's shadow in A's, whose wealth was as loud as her crimson lipstick, stepped forward. Her eyes rat over Cassandra's dress, her lips curling into a sneer. "That bargain bin outfit doesn't scream table 3, does it?" A ripple of laughter spread through nearby guests, their eyes glinting with amusement. Cassandra's spine stiffened, but her face remained composed, a mask of dignity forged through years of navigating rooms like this. "My reservation was confirmed," she said, addressing Melassa, but loud enough for Claire to hear. "I'm not the one who's lost," Claire laughed, a brittle sound that drew more heads. "Sweetheart, this isn't your scene. Try the diner down the street." The crowd's amusement grew, a low hum of agreement from those who mistook cruelty for wit. Veronica, now seated at table 3, sipped a flute of champagne, her smirk assolent endorsement. Cassandra's fist clenched at her sides, not in rage, but in restraint. She was a tenure professor, a scholar who'd built her life on precision and resilience. Yet here she was, reduced to a spectacle for the ladies' entertainment. Gareth Simmons, the manager, appeared, his slick-back hair and navy suit exuding practice charm. His name tag gleamed under the chandelier's light, but his eyes assessed Cassandra like an equation that didn't add up. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone suggesting Cassandra was the problem. "Your staff gave away Meyer-served table?" she said, her voice steady. Gareth's half-smile was patronizing. "We do our best, but mix up Chapin. We can seat you near the kitchen. It's quieter." The implication landed like a slap. She was the anomaly, the guest who didn't fit Viva Blang's curated aesthetic. Claire clapped her hands, delighted. "Perfect. She'll feel right at home with the help." More laughter erupted. The room now a theater of her humiliation. Cassandra's pulse raced, but her gaze remained locked on Gareth, who gestured to security with a casual flick of his wrist. The guards in discreet black suits moved closer, their presence a silent threat. The air grew heavy, the jazz now a mocking backdrop to her eraser. Cassandra stood alone, her dignity a flickering flame in a room determined to snuff it out. Yet outside the faint hum of an electric engine approached, a whisper of power that would soon shatter the illusion of this gilded world. The polished doors of Viva Blanc parted with a mechanical sigh, and the faint hum of an electric engine faded into the late afternoon's lavender-scented air. Robert Reed stepped across the threshold, his navy three-piece suit tailored to a precision that whispered wealth without a single shout. His fair skin caught the chandelier's melassa glow, and his eyes, sharp as steel-blue ice, scanned the dining hall with a predator's focus. The room didn't know him. Not yet, but it felt him. A ripple of unease cutting through the clink of glasses and the jazz's velvet hum. Conversations faltered. Forks hesitated mid-air, and the elite, so accustomed to commanding attention, found themselves eclipsed by a man who needed no introduction. Kem Lawson stood near the exit, her arms crossed, her jaw a tight line of restrained fury. The sting of Maya mockery, bargain bin, still echoing in her ears, lingered, as did the manager Gareth Simmons's dismissive offer of a kitchen-side seat. The security guards loomed closer, their black suits a silent promise of removal. But as Robor gaze locked onto Cassandra, the air shifted, heavy with the weight of something unstoppable. He crossed the marble floor in swift, measured strides, his polished leather soles whispering against the stone, each step a drumbeat of intent. The crowd parted instinctively, their whispers trailing him like shadows. "You've been standing here this whole time." Robort's voice was low, laced with a tension that made the guards freeze. Cassandra didn't answer. Her eyes burning with a scholar's clarity said enough. She tilted her head toward the hostess podium where Melassa stood rigid, her tight bun unraveling under the pressure of Robor's presence. "They say there's no reservation," Cassandra said, her tone even but edged. "They gave my table to her." She nodded toward Emily, who lounged at table 3, her champagne flute glinting as she watched the scene with a cat-like smirk. Robert turned slowly, his gaze settling on Gareth, who hovered near a decorative pillar, his slick back hair now glistening with nervous sweat. "You gave away my wife's table?" Robort's question wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a guillotine slicing through the room's pretense. Gareth cleared his throat, his practice charm faltering. "Mr. Reed, there's been a system error. We didn't realize." His words stumbled, caught in the lie. Robert raised a hand, silencing him. "You didn't realize she was my wife, or you didn't realize she mattered?" The room held its breath. Guests leaned forward, their silk dresses and tailored suits rustling as they craned to witness the unraveling of Viva Blanc's curated order. Claire Dubois, never one to see the spotlight, stepped forward, her crimson lips curled in disdain. "Oh, please," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "This is a private establishment, not a charity event. Your wife's little tantrum is ruining the ambiance." A few patrons, those who mistook cruelty for sophistication, chuckled, their approval a soft hum of complicity. Robort's eyes flicked to Claire, assessing her as on might a wasp before swatting it. "And you are?" he asked, his tone deceptively calm. Claire tossed her hair, emboldened by the crowd's fleeting support. "Claire Dubois. And I'm not impressed by this display." She gestured at Cassandra, her diamond bracelet flashing. She doesn't belong here, and you're making a fool of yourself pretending otherwise. The words landed like a spark on dry tinder, igniting murmurs of agreement from the elite and glares from a few others who sensed the tide turning. Cassandra's fingers tightened around her bracelet, but her face remained a mask of composure, her dignity a fortress against Maya venom. Malik, however, stepped closer to Claire, his presence a quiet storm. "You think this is about belonging?" he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "This is about a reservation. Her name, her right erased because you in this place decided she wasn't worth the table." Claire scoffed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as robot words sank in. Gareth, sensing the situation slipping, tried to intervene. "Mr. Reed, let's discuss this privately. We can find another table." Robort cut him off, his gaze never leaving Claire. There is no other table. Table 3 was hers, confirmed, time-stamped, paid for. "And you," he turned to Gareth, "chose to treat my wife like an afterthought." The manager's face palled, his authority dissolving under the weight of Malik's stare. Veronica, still seated, swirled her champagne, her smirk now tinged with caution. The room's division deepened. Some guests nodded at Maya bravado, others whispered in discomfort, their loyalty to the status quo wavering. Melassa, behind the podium, clutched their observation book like a shield, her eyes darting to the security guards who hesitated, unsure whose side to take. Cassandra stood taller, her silence louder than any retort. Her presence a challenge to the room's arrogance. Outside, the Tesla's sleek silhouette gleamed under the valet's canopy, a silent sentinel of the power Malik wielded. Inside, the jazz slowed, the pianist's fingers faltering as the dining hall became a stage. Robort's hand rested lightly on Cassandra's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that spoke louder than words. The confrontation was only beginning, and the room, for all its glittering excess, was about to learn the cost of underestimating a woman who refused to be erased. The air in Viva Blanc crackled, as if the chandelier's Melassa glow had ignited the room's carefully curated civility. Robort Reed stood beside Kem Lawson, his hand a steady anchor on her shoulder, his presence a storm held in check. His fair skin caught the light, his steel blue eyes sharp with resolve. The dining hall moments ago, a theater of whispers and smirks, now teetered on the edge of chaos. Maya venomous words, "She doesn't belong here," still hung in the air, her diamond bracelet glinting as she faced Robor's unyielding stare. Manager Gareth Simmons, sweat beading on his brow, hovered near the hostess podium, his authority unraveling. Emily, ensconced at table 3, swirled her champagne with a smirk, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The jazz pianist's melody faltered, notes scattering like leaves before a gale. Claire, emboldened by the elite's murmured approval, stepped closer to Cassandra, her crimson lips twisting into a sneer. "You're ruining everything," she hissed, her voice a blade aimed at Cassandra's composure. "This is our space, and your little drama is pathetic." Cassandra's eyes, sharp with a scholar's precision, met Maya without flinching. Her silence was a shield, her dignity a fire that refused to dim. But Claire, mistaking restraint for weakness, raised her hand, the motion swift and vicious, poised to slap Cassandra. "Know your place," she spat, her voice echoing through the stunned hall. The room gasped, a collective inhale that froze time. But before Maya's hand could connect, Robort's grip clamped around her wrist, his movement so fluid it seemed rehearsed. "Touch her and you'll regret it," he said, his voice a low, lethal growl that reverberated off the marble floors. Maya's eyes widened, her confidence shattering into shock as Robort's strength held her in place. Cassandra's heart raced, not with fear, but with a surge of vindication, her poised exterior masking the thrill of the tide turning. The crowd fractured. Half the elite clapped for Claire, their applause a brittle defense of their privilege, while others, including a black couple near the bar, stood, their glares cutting through the room's arrogance. "Enough!" A voice boomed from the kitchen doors, raw and unexpected. Chef Marcus, a grizzled black man with silver threading his hair, stepped into the light, his apron stained from years of service, his eyes heavy with unspoken truce, locked onto Gareth. "I've seen this too long," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. Names like hers, erased, moved, forgotten for better guests. It's no error. It's what you do. The room stilled. Marcus's words a match struck in a powder keg. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their silk dresses rustling, while Gareth's face drained of color, his slick back hair now a mockery of his control. Robert sized the moment, pulling his phone from his pocket with a deliberateness that commanded every eye. 17 times, he said, his voice rising just enough to carry. 17 minority guests had their tables reassigned to white patrons in the last 6 months. He tapped the screen, projecting a digital reservation log onto a nearby wall, timestamps, glowing like indictments. "All under your watch, Gareth," the manager stammered, his hands twitching. "That's not intentional," he managed. But the lie crumbled under Marcus's piercing gaze and the crowd's growing unease. Veronica, sensing the shift, set down her flute and rose, her emerald dress catching the light. "This is absurd," she said, her voice a forced laugh. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." Her apology was as hollow as the crystal in her hand, and Robor's eyes narrowed. "A misunderstanding?" he repeated, stepping toward her. "You sat at my wife's table knowing it wasn't yours because you thought she was invisible." Veronica's smirk faltered, her confidence eroding as the black couple began clapping slowly, their defiance sparking murmurs of agreement from others. The division deepened. A man in a designer scarf shouted, "Keep the riffraff out!" his words rallying Maya supporters who nodded vigorously. But a young woman in a hijab at a corner table stood, her voice soft but clear. "She's not the problem. You are." The room erupted in crosstalk, glasses clinking nervously as waiters froze, unsure where to stand. Cassandra, her bracelet glinting as she adjusted her stance, remained the eye of the storm, her presence a silent demand for accountability. Gareth, desperate to regain control, gestured to security. "Escort them out," he barked, pointing at Robert and Cassandra. But the guards hesitated, their eyes flicking to Marcus, whose testimony had cracked the room's facade. Robert stepped forward, his phone still aloft, the log a damning beacon. "This isn't over," he said, his voice now thunder. "You didn't just erase her name. You erased your own future." The words landed like a gavel, and Claire, her wrist, still stinging from Robor's grip, shrank back, her bravado dissolving. The pianist abandoned his keys, the silence deafening. Veronica sank into her chair, her champagne untouched. The crowd split between loyalty to privilege and the dawning weight of truth, watched as Robert and Cassandra stood united, their silhouettes framed by the wisteria-draped window. The confrontation had ignited a fire, and Viva Blanc, for all its glittering excess, was about to burn. The frosted glass door of Viva Blanc's private boardroom clicked shut, sealing the dining hall's chaos outside like a storm trapped in a bottle. Inside, the air was sterile, heavy with the scent of polished leather and unspoken dread. Robert Reed sat at the head of the obsidian table, his navy suit as unyielding as his resolve, his fair skin catching the projector's blue glow, his hands closed with a calm that belied the fire in his steel blue eyes. The board, 6 executives in tailored suits, their faces a gallery of unease, fidgeted in high-backed chairs. Gareth Simmons entered last, his slick back hair now a disheveled mask of panic, clutching a leather portfolio he hadn't dared open. He took an unassigned seat at Thadable's far end, Robort's deliberate omission hanging like a noose. The projector hummed to life, casting a cold blue glow across the room. Robort's voice, her steady as a blade, broke the silence. Clause 12 of the operating charter. Gross misconduct requires executive review. Tonight, we're not debating numbers. We're dismantling a system. His words echoed Chef Marcus' testimony from the dining hall, where the veteran had exposed years of erased names and the digital reservation log Robert had displayed, indicting Gareth for 17 reassignments of minority-guested tables. The boardroom, a fortress of power, now felt like a courtroom, and Robert was both judge and executioner. One executive, silver-haired and steeped in old money, leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Malik, Gareth's been with us from the start. This incident was unfortunate. But is it worth this escalation?" Robort's lips twitched. Not a smile, but a predator's acknowledgement. "Unfortunate," he repeated, tapping his phone. The projector flickered, revealing a spreadsheet of timestamps and names, each a wound in Vivlanc's polished facade. 17 guests displaced, all minorities, Alunder Gareth's overrides. This isn't an incident. It's your culture. Gareth's voice, thin and desperate, cut in. Those were operational decisions. VIP's last-minute requests. His hands trembled, betraying the lie. Robert leaned forward, his gaze pinning Gareth to his chair. VIPs like Claire Dubois, who walked in and demanded my wife's table, or Emily, who sat there knowing it wasn't hers. He paused, letting the name sink in. You didn't just erase Kem Lawson, you erased integrity. The room's silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint buzz of the projector. A younger board member, her glasses reflecting the screen's glow, cleared her throat. The data is clear, but intent is harder to prove. Robort's response was swift, his phone now displaying a single timestamp. 2:48 p.m. when Cassandra's reservation was overwritten. Only management can override VIP bookings, he said, his voice a quiet thunder. That's you, Gareth. The manager's face crumpled, his portfolio sliding to the floor with a soft thud. Outside in the dining hall, Claire Dubois lingered, her emerald dress a stark contrast to her faltering bravado. She'd retreated from the confrontation, but not far enough. Her phone pressed to her ear as she called her father, a financier with stakes in Vivlanc. Fix this, she hissed, but the line went dead. Her father's voice, curtain final, echoed in her mind. You're on your own. The rejection hit like a slap, her crimson lips parting in disbelief as guests nearby turned away, their whispers sharp with judgment. Claire's status, once a shield, was now a shattered relic. Back in the boardroom, Robert stood, his presence towering. As majority shareholder, I'm terminating Gareth Simmons, effective immediately for breach of ethical standards. He slid a stapled document across the table, its pages thick with legal ease. Gareth lurched to his feet, his voice shaking. A decade of loyalty, and you throw me out for one mistake. Robort's eyes narrowed. One mistake. You built a system where prejudice was policy. You're not fired. You're erased. The board gasped, a collective flinch as Gareth's exit echoed like a slammed gavel. Robert turned to the executives, his tone unrelenting. Maya family investments are severed. Their influence ends tonight. The decision was final, a blade cutting through the room's last threads of resistance. The executives nodded, their silence a reluctant surrender to a new order. As Robert left the boardroom, Cassandra waited in the dining hall, her ivory silk dress catching the Wister mysterious shadow through the garden window. A young server, his hands trembling, approached her, slipping a folded napkin into her palm. Cassandra opened it, her breath catching at the words scrolled in hurried ink. You're not the first, but you'll be the last. The note, a quiet confession from a witness to Viva Blank's sins, burned in her hand. She met Robort's gaze as he merged, his face unreadable, but his eyes all light with purpose. The dining hall, now a fractured mosaic of whispers and averted glances, watched as Cassandra and Robert moved toward the exit. Claire, still clutching her phone, stood frozen near the bar, her socialite armor stripped bare. The elite who once cheered her now shunned her, their loyalty as fleeting as the champagne's bubbles. The server's note tucked into Cassandra's hand was a spark, a promise that the reckoning was only beginning. Beyond the glass doors, the city pulsed, unaware that Vivlan's gilded walls had cracked. And from those cracks, a new standard would rise. The dawn broke over Viva Blanc like a quiet revolution, Thessady's skyline casting long shadows across its glass facade. Now less a fortress of exclusivity and more a canvas for change. Inside the dining hall stood stripped bare, its table sun-clothed, the chandelier dimmed to a soft melassa glow. The scent of truffle oil had faded, replaced by the crisp promise of a new beginning. Kem Lawson's folded napkin with its scrolled confession. You're not the first, but you'll be the last, lay tucked in her pocket as she and Robert Reed stepped away from the boardroom's fallout. Gareth Simmons was gone. His termination a seismic crack in Vivlance's foundation. Maya influence, once a glittering shield, had crumbled with her family's severed investments. But the true work, Robert knew, was not in tearing down. It was in rebuilding. Robert stood in the center of the empty dining hall, his navy suit replaced by a charcoal blazer. His presence no longer a storm, but a steady hand guiding a ship through uncharted waters. The staff, servers, cooks, janitors, gathered in a loose circle. their faces a mosaic of hope and weariness. Robort voice, firm but warm, filled the space. "This place was built on silence," he said, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "Silence that let names be erased, dignity be traded for image that ends today." The words landed softly, but their weight was undeniable, echoing the server's note that had burned in Cassandra's hand. He unveiled his vision, an AI-driven reservation system, encrypted and transparent, logging every booking and change to prevent bias. "No more overrides," he said, gesturing to a sleek digital kiosk now installed at the hostess station. "Every name counts," the staff murmured, some nodding, others exchanging glances. A young server, Isaiah, raised a tentative hand. "Will Webber heard now?" he asked, his voice carrying the scars of years passed over for promotions. Robort met his gaze. "You're not just heard, Isaiah. You're leading. Head of guest relations effective immediately." The room exhaled, a collective release as Isaiah's eyes widened, his shoulders straightening with newfound purpose. The transformation extended beyond systems. Robort unveiled a redesigned floor plan, banishing hidden tables near service doors. The lighting, once cold and exclusive, now bathed the hall in warmth. Every seat visible, every guest equal. The menu, rewritten with intention, honored cuisines from cultures too often sidelined. West African yalof, Haitian go, indigenous fry bread. Each dish paired with a note, inspired by those whose names shape the world but not the guest list. The staff, many from those very communities, stood taller, their reflections gleaming in the polished marble. Chef Marcus, the grizzled veteran, whose testimony had cracked the dining hall's facade, stepped forward, his apron now replaced by a tailored jacket. Robort clasped his shoulder. "Marcus, you've seen this place's sins. Now you'll shape its soul. Culinary director starting today." Marcus's eyes, heavy with decades of silenced truce, glistened but held firm. "I'll cook for everyone," he said, his voice a vow. The staff erupted in applause. Not the polite claps of the elite, but a raw, heartfelt roar that rattled the crystal stemware. Beyond the dining hall, the changes rippled. Robort introduced blind hiring screenings, stripping away the vague fit that had favored privilege. Weekly staff dialogues led by Isaiah became a space for grievances and ideas, dismantling the fear that once gagged voices like Marcus's. The restaurant's ethos shifted, its new emblem, a gold thread woven into every blazer, reading, "Equity is the new luxury." Maya, a hostess who'd once been told to smile softer, wore her natural curls like a crown, her confidence a quiet rebellion against the old guard. Table 3 by the wisteria-draped window was no longer just a seat. Robort unveiled a small plaque, its engraving simple but searing. Dr. Cassandra Lawson's tableware dignity rewrote the rules. The staff fell silent, their eyes tracing the words. Cassandra, standing at the room's edge, felt a warmth in her chest, not triumph but grounding. Her stand, born of Astolan reservation, had become a legacy etched in brass. She met Robor's gaze, assonant acknowledgement of their shared resolve. The city began to notice. Guests trickled in. Not the old elite with their sequins and entitlement, but a diverse tapestry. Families, artists, scholars drawn by whispers of a restaurant reborn. They sat at tables once reserved for the right kind, their latter filling the hall with a music no jazz could match. Outside, the wisteria bloomed fuller as if mirroring the space's awakening. Claire Dubois, now a ghost in the elite circles, was spotted lingering across the street, her emerald dress a faded echo of her lost influence. As the staff dispersed, preparing for the evening's first guest, Robort stood alone by table 3, his fingers tracing the plaque's edges. The restaurant was no longer his secret investment, but a beacon of accountability. The transformation was incomplete. Resistance would come, old habits would linger, but the foundation was set. Kem joined him, her ivory silk replaced by a tailored blazer, her presence a quiet command. "It's a start," she said, her voice steady. Malik nodded, a start that no one can undo. The dining hall, once a stage for Eraser, now hummed with possibility, ready to welcome a world it had once turned away. The twilight sky draped Thessaly in a velvet hush, its pulse softened by the glow of street lights and distant stars. Viva Blanc stood reborn, its glass facade no longer a barrier but a window to a new era. The wisteria framing the garden window bloomed with defiant vibrance. mirroring the restaurant's quiet revolution. Inside, the dining hall hummed with a warmth that had replaced the old chill of exclusivity. Its tables dressed in linen, its air alive with the sense of saffron and hope. Kem Lawson and Malik Reed had reshaped Vivre Blanc through AI-tracked reservations, a menu honoring erased cultures, and Table 3's plaque, Dr. Cassandra Lawson's table, where dignity rewrote the rules. Now they returned, not to reclaim, but to affirm. A black SUV with tinted windows glided to the curb, its engine a whisper against the evening's calm. No valet rushed forward. The moment demanded reverence, not haste. Cassandra stepped out first, her tailored navy dress catching the dusk shimmer, her coils cascading freely, a crown of resilience. Robert followed, his slate gray suit, a study in understated power, his fair skin glowing under the soft light, his dark hair neatly trimmed. His hand found hers with a natural ease. Their silhouettes, framed by the restaurant's glow, drew every eye on the street, but their focus was singular. The doors that once marked Kimmy's humiliation now stood open, inviting. Isaiah, the young black server, turned head of guest relations, greeted them just inside, his sleek blazer bearing the gold-stitched emblem. Equity is the new luxury. His smile was no longer cautious, but radiant, his voice steady with pride. Dr. Lawson, Mr. Reed, welcome back. Your table awaits. Kem inclined her head, her eyes warm. Thank you, Isaiah. The entryway fell silent, staff straightening, guests pausing mid-bite, their gazes not of curiosity but respect. The memory of Cassandra's stand, defying Maya raised hand, Gareth's dismissal, and Arum's arrogance lingered like a sacred echo. They moved through the main hall, the marble floor gleaming beneath their steps, the chandelier casting soft light on a crowd as diverse as the city itself. No one intercepted with rehearsed smiles or empty apologies. Table 3 by the wisteria-draped window stood unoccupied, its white linen pristine, a single candle flickering beside the plaque. Isaiah pulled out Kemi's chair, Robor hand-brushing hers as she sat, a gesture of solidarity that needed no words. Tonight, Malik sighed, his voice low. You set the tone. Cassandra's lips curved, not in triumph, but in quiet certainty. Let's see if they're listening. A young server, Natalie, approached, her hand steady despite a nervous flush. She placed 2 menus down, then set a bottle of rare vintage wine on the table, its label etched in gold. Tree where justice prevails. From Chef Marcus, Natalie said, her voice soft but clear. He says it's for those who lead without shouting. Cassandra's breath caught, her fingers tracing the label's delicate script. The gift was more than wine. It was a testament, a seal on the legacy she'd forged. Robort lifted his glass, his eyes meeting hers. To you, he said, the clink of their toast resonating beyond their table. The room watched, not with the old skepticism, but with a reverence that felt earned. A couple at a nearby table nodded respectfully, their smiles genuine. A woman at the bar, her hijab catching the light, raised her glass in a silent salute, mouthing, "Thank you." The diners, artists, families, scholars, reflected Viva Blonde's new soul, their presence a rejection of the elite who once ruled through entitlement. The menu with dishes like Senegalese Tien and Cherokee Sukatach told stories of cultures no longer erased, each bite a quiet act of recognition. Outside, a lone figure stood across the street, her emerald dress a faded relic in the dusk. Claire Dubois, once a socialite queen, clutched her coat, her crimson lips pressed into a thin line. Shunned by Thelite, her family's influence severed. She was a ghost haunting the empire she'd helped fracture. Her eyes fixed on Table 3's glow, burned with a mix of envy and defeat. The city had moved on, its pulse no longer hers to command. Inside, Cassandra leaned into conversation with Malik. Her composure, a tapestry of strength and grace. The weight of that first day, standing in ivory silk, her name erased, her dignity bartered, hadn't vanished, but transformed. She wasn't here to gloat. She was here to endure, to be seen, to prove that a single stand could rewrite a room's rules. The staff moved with purpose, their blazers gleaming with the new emblem. their actions a testament to Marcus's leadership and Isaiah's vision. As the meal unfolded, the candle on table 3 burned brighter, its flame a beacon in the city's heartbeat. Cassandra Sether forked down, her gaze sweeping the hall, the plaque beside her, the wine in her hand, the eyes that met hers with respect. They were proof. History had a receipt, and hers was written in gold. Robort reached for her hand, his touch a vow. "This is yours," he said. Kem nodded, her voice soft but sure. "Ours." Beyond the glass, the wisteria swayed, a witness to a revolution that began with one woman's refusal to be erased, now etched into the bones of a restaurant reborn. As the wisteria sways outside Vivre Blanc, Cassandra and Robor triumph lingers, a testament to courage that reshaped an empire. This story of dignity and defiance is yours to carry. Share your thoughts below. What moved you? What resonated? Tell us where you're listening from and let your voice join the reckoning. Thank you for walking this journey with us, for standing by table 3 where justice prevailed. Subscribe, hit the bell, and meet us again for the next tale that might just change how you see the world. Until then, stay bold, stay true, and never let your name be erased.